If you are interested in living in a rural area surrounded by nature, you may have paid attention to the stories of young people who choose to go to the countryside and become a farmer. Returning back to the countryside is the expression Koreans use to refer to these people. Stories about people going back to the countryside after retirement used to be common, especially about the retirees whose hometowns are originally in rural areas. But now we see those in their 20s and 30s choose to become a farmer. Also, those who can work at home choose to live in the countryside. For them, the polluted environment and unaffordable housing prices in the city are the main issues. However, becoming a full-time farmer or dreaming of a romantic rural life may not be all that it is cracked up to be. The most common issue is the intensity of manual labor you have to handle. You may live in a less polluted environment, but it's obviously less convenient compared to life in the city. Also, integrating into an existing rural community is not an easy matter. Telecommunication technology and improved transportation systems make life in rural areas easier than before. High youth unemployment and sky-high housing costs in urban areas will likely land more young Koreans in the countryside. For socioeconomic reasons or out of love for Mother Nature, starting a rural life at a young age is emerging as a new way of living in Korean society. A lot of people daydream about escaping the concrete jungle and settling in rural areas. So SJ said dream, I said daydream. To daydream is a little bit different. It means that you might be at work and you hate your job. So you're thinking, what happens if I won the lottery? Or wow, it'd be nice to live on a farm. So you're kind of thinking about this way. You're fantasizing, you're dreaming in your head while doing something else. So I know Koreans say romang. You have kind of a romang. That's kind of a dream, daydream, or fantasy. And then I said they want to escaping the concrete jungle. Concrete jungle means a city, especially a big city like Seoul. So we talk about the jungle in tropical areas like the Philippines or Vietnam, but the concrete jungle is like a big city. You have to worry about traffic, high costs, crime. So there's a lot of things to worry about. So we call also cities concrete jungles. Many fantasize about living in a sparsely populated areas of the country over an urban environment. So I said living in sparsely populated areas. If it's sparse, something is sparse, that means it's spread out. So Seoul is densely populated. The opposite is sparsely populated. So if you live in the countryside. And finally, over an urban environment is just another way to say a city. And then we have, for example, suburban. Korea doesn't have a lot of traditional, what we call American suburbs, which is a combination of houses and shopping centers and schools, but it's less densely populated than the city, but not as sparsely populated as the countryside. Younger people who see less opportunity in the cities choose to make a career move to become a farmer. Remote areas are some of the only places people can afford to buy a home. So I said the younger people, they choose to make a career move. A career move is when you change your job or even change your industry. So for example, if you're in accounting and you go to marketing, that's a career move. But these people are choosing to work in offices in Seoul, but then make a career move to become a farmer. And then I said remote areas. So we talk about the countryside, we talk about rural areas, but we also say remote areas. Remote means far away. So, if you're living in the middle of the mountains of Gangwon-do, that's pretty remote. I mean, it's far away from big cities and highways. A shrinking job market and sky-high real estate prices have driven millennials outside the city to change their jobs to till the soil. So I said a shrinking job market. So a job market that's getting smaller. We're seeing more automation. We're seeing less companies hiring. So there's less jobs. That means it's shrinking and getting smaller. And sky high real estate prices. So I read last week that Seoul apartments that are a record high right now. So if they're sky high, that means they've peaked. They've kind of reached the top. And I said these prices have driven millennials outside the city. So the verb to drive, you can drive a car. But for example, if it starts raining, that will drive people indoors. So we use the word to drive when an outside force pushes people or things or animals to do something. So since like the economy's not that good, it's driving people to the countryside. And finally, I said they'll change their jobs to till the soil. Tilling the soil is the actual act of digging up the soil and farming and planting and growing. So we say till the soil is another expression for that. For those who can cybercommute and don't mind spending a few hours driving into work, living outside the city is perfect. All right, guys, so I want to talk about cybercommute. So we talked, during COVID-19, a lot of people have been, we say, working from home. So we use a lot of different language. So the first word actually was telecommute. And some people still use that. So telecommute, that means phone commute. So if someone was telecommuting, that means they were working at home or working from home. You can use both. But nowadays we use cybercommute because people are on their computers using the internet. So we don't use telecommute. We still understand it. But the ones we do are telecommute, cybercommute, working from home, working at home, remote work, or working remotely. So we use all those different expressions nowadays when people are working at or from home. So let me use working remotely in a sentence next. Living in the middle of nowhere is great for people who can handle a long commute or if you can work remotely. So again, at the end, I use work remotely. In the beginning, I said living in the middle of nowhere. Middle of nowhere means somewhere very far away. So I gave an example. If you lived in a small farming village in Gawando, that would be in the middle of nowhere. It means it's not near any big mall or highway or anything that's like a big museum. It's very far away. So when something's very far away or rural, we say middle of nowhere. Living on a farm sounds ideal. However, it is physically demanding. Also, there are issues of culture and generational differences with the locals. Okay, so I said living on a farm sounds ideal. So if something is ideal, it's kind of perfect. So it sounds perfect. I get to wake up and grow my own food and it sounds great. But, if something sounds ideal, it sounds perfect, but in reality, it might not be. But if it is ideal, you would say, or ideal for you, that means it is perfect for you. And I said it's physically demanding. So physically demanding means you need to do a lot of physical labor. You've got to, dig up the soil. You got to plant. You got to put it back. You got to carry stuff. We also say for example, mentally demanding. So learning English is very mentally demanding. So your brain has to work a lot. It has to memorize. It has to repeat. It's got to do conversations. So we kind of say physically, mentally, and also emotionally demanding. So for example, if you're dating someone and they're always fighting with you and you're always crying or getting upset, that's very emotionally demanding. Your emotions have to work very hard. And then finally, I said generational differences with the locals. The locals are people who live in a certain area and they have their own culture and way of doing things. So, if you go to, we live here in Seoul, but again, if my example of going to the middle of Gawando to a small village, those are the locals. Yeah, we are not the locals. They have lived there for a long time. So to describe someone as local mean that they lived in a place and they are established culturally. So, for example, if you go to a bar, but you say, oh, there's only locals there, that means only the people who live in that area go to that specific bar. Working from dusk till dawn in the elements is the dark side of owning a farm. There are also social obstacles that city folk face when they live in a small knit community like a farming town. So working from dawn till dusk. Dawn means the morning and dusk means the evening. So working from dawn till dusk means you wake up when the sun rises and then when the sun sets. So you have to work all day as long as there's daylight hours. And I said working in the elements. In the elements is another way of saying the weather or environmental conditions. So if you get up and it's raining, you still have to work, or if it's windy, or if it's cold, or it's hot, you're working in the elements or in the dirt. So we say if you work in the elements, that means you are outside. And I said the dark side of owning a farm, if something's the dark side of something, we usually say it's the negative. And in the second sentence, I said there are social obstacles that city folk face. City folk, it comes from the German word Volk. It means people. But in English, we say folk means people. So city folk are city people. Country folk, country people. And these are the obstacles they face when they live in a small knit community like a farming town. So small knit community means that these people know each other, they work with each other, they hang out with each other, they spend holidays with each other. So a small knit community is a very closely bonded socially and sometimes even professionally. And it's hard to kind of break into a small knit community. Thanks, guys, and please smash the like and subscribe button. Bye-bye.